This is Sean Thomas Radcliffe. Welcome to another episode of Preservation Oaks. In this series, we introduce you to professionals from museums, cultural, genealogical, and historical societies across the United States. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. Good day, everyone. Thanks for being here. We have a great program for you today. For this episode, we take a deeper look into how World War I impacted United States families. The Great War, known to us as World War I, stands as a pivotal moment in history that reshaped the geopolitical landscape and irrevocably altered the lives of millions. As the conflict raged across the European continent, its echoes reverberated far beyond the trenches, reaching the shores of the United States. This discussion delves into the profound and often overlooked impact of World War I on American families, unraveling the intricate threads of joy, sorrow, resilience, and change woven into the tapestry of domestic life. In the early 20th century, the United States found itself reluctantly drawn into the maelstrom of global conflict. As young men donned uniforms and sailed across the Atlantic to engage in harrowing battles of the Western Front, their absence left a void that echoed through the homes and communities they left behind. Families grappled with the dual burden of anxiety for their loved ones' safety and the challenges of maintaining a semblance of normalcy amid the chaos of war. The societal fabric underwent a profound transformation as women assumed roles traditionally reserved for men, entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers to support the war effort. The war's impact was not confined to the battlefield. It permeated every aspect of civilian life, shaping the dynamics of family, work, and community. The scars of conflict were etched not only in the memories of those who served, but also in the collective consciousness of American families. This exploration delves into untold stories of sacrifice, resilience, and adaptation as families grappled with the seismic shifts brought about by World War I. We'll navigate the emotional terrain of a nation at war and reflect on the enduring legacy imprinted on the familial bonds that weathered the storm of a world in turmoil. Join us as we journey through time to uncover the profound impact of World War I on the very heart of American society, the family unit. I'm Sean Thomas Radcliffe, and I'm coming to you from Salt Lake City, and this is Preservation Oaks, the internationally syndicated original talk program on MicroStream Radio, where we feature information about museums, cultural and heritage institutions, associations, historical and genealogical societies, and history-focused media creators across the United States. By the way, our main platform is preservationoaks.podbean.com, but you can find us on nearly all podcast platforms as well as Rumble, Getter, Minds, TikTok, Facebook, Odyssey, and YouTube. So wherever you listen to the program, I appreciate it very much when you like, comment, follow, or subscribe. If you're listening and you'd like to be a guest on the program, or if you have questions or comments about the program, just spin off an email to preservationoaks@gmail.com. On our next episode of Preservation Oaks, we meet with Ms. Sharon Jett. the director of Cedar Springs Historical Society and Museum, located in Cedar Springs, Michigan. We'll step back in time when we visit with Ms. Jett and talk about the Cedar Springs Museum or touring the one-room Payne School. The school was renovated to reflect the century-long era in public education when one teacher, lodging with a school family, taught all 8 grades. In Michigan's early development, land for these schools was reserved as townships were established. As population in the townships increased, more schools were established so that pupils would not have to walk more than 2 or 3 miles to school. Established as a lumber town in 1856, Cedar Springs boasted numerous lumber and shingle mills. For a number of years, it was the northern terminus of the Grand Rapids and Indiana Railroad and also was the crossing point for East-West Toledo, Saginaw, and Muskegon Railroad. Among the museum's displays, we'll talk about a turn-of-the-century home, the old general store, Native American history, lumbering, farming, and railroad displays. I'm really looking forward to meeting Ms. Jett and finding out more about the Historical Society, the museum, and Cedar Springs. It should be a fun and interesting episode. That being said, let's get this show snapping. Now let's start this discussion by reviewing the top 10 things that changed in the United States as a result of our involvement in World War I. Number 1, women, most of whom never worked outside the home, were in high demand to work at all types of factories and businesses. Nearly 1 million women were employed in jobs previously held by men. Number 2, future President Herbert Hoover was appointed the director of the newly created U.S. Food Administration by President Wilson. Number 3, the war led to significant technological advancements such as tanks, airplanes, and chemical weapons. Number 4, the war led to significant economic growth and prosperity. Number 5, the war led to significant changes in American society, such as increased patriotism and nationalism. Number 6, the war led to significant changes in American culture, such as increased interest in sports and entertainment. Number 7, the war led to significant changes in American education, such as increased emphasis on science and technology. Number 8, the war led to significant changes in American politics, such as increased government spending and regulations. Number 9, the war led to significant changes in American foreign policy, such as increased involvement in international affairs. Number 10, Americans became more isolationist after the war. They grew tired of foreign wars and wanted to focus on their own country rather than getting involved in international affairs. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 had profound consequences for the United States, both in terms of its involvement in global affairs and the transformation of its society and economy. The United States initially followed a policy of neutrality and pursued a course of non-intervention in the conflict. The U.S. government, led by President Woodrow Wilson, sought to keep the country out of the war and maintain a position of impartiality. The United States began selling arms and other war materials to the Allies relatively early in the conflict, but the extent of such transactions increased over time because as the war in Europe progressed and economic ties with the Allies strengthened, the U.S. became an important supplier of goods, including arms, to the Allied powers, primarily Britain and France. American banks and businesses started providing loans and selling various materials to support the war efforts of the Allies. While there were some sales and loans in the early years of the war, the U.S. significantly increased its involvement as a supplier after 1915. Which is after the sinking of the Lusitania by the Germans. By the time the U.S. officially entered the war in 1917, it had become a crucial economic partner for the Allies, helping to sustain their military efforts. The U.S. entry into the war further solidified its role as a major contributor to the Allied war effort. While the United States was not directly involved in the fighting until it officially entered the war in 1917, it did become a significant supplier of goods and loans to the Allies, contributing to their war efforts. The policy of supplying the Allies was driven by economic considerations rather than direct military involvement in the early years of the conflict. After continued atrocities committed by Germany against the United States, President Woodrow Wilson went to the U.S. Congress on April 2, 1917, to ask them to consider passing a declaration of war against Germany. Congress did that, and the U.S. officially entered World War I on April 6, 1917. Here, for your listening enjoyment, is an audio transcript of the speech that President Wilson gave to Congress on April 2, 1917. I think it's so interesting and marvelous to hear a president know his duty and his constitutional boundaries, and to describe his relationship with the American people the way he does. That, for me, makes it a must to include in this episode.
Gentlemen of the Congress, I have called the Congress into extraordinary session because there are serious, very serious choices of policy to be made, and made immediately, which it was neither right nor constitutionally permissible that I should assume the responsibility of making. On the 3rd of February last, I officially laid before you the extraordinary announcement of the Imperial German government that on and after the 1st day of February, it was its purpose to put aside all restraints of law or of humanity, and use its submarines to sink every vessel that sought to approach either the ports of Great Britain and Ireland, or the western coasts of Europe, or any of the ports controlled by the enemies of Germany within the Mediterranean. That had seemed to be the object of the German submarine warfare earlier in the war. But since April of last year, the Imperial government had somewhat restrained the commanders of its undersea craft in conformity with its promise then given to us that passenger boats should not be sunk, and that due warning would be given to all other vessels which its submarines might seek to destroy, when no resistance was offered or escape attempted, and care taken that their crews were given at least a fair chance to save their lives in their open boats. The precautions taken were meager and haphazard enough, as was proved in distressing instance after instance in the progress of the cruel and unmanly business, but a certain degree of restraint was observed. The new policy has swept every restriction aside. Vessels of every kind, whatever their flag, their character, their cargo, their destination, their errand, have been ruthlessly sent to the bottom without warning and without thought of help or mercy for those on board. The vessels of friendly neutrals, along with those of belligerents. Even hospital ships, and ships carrying relief to the sorely bereaved and stricken people of Belgium, though the latter were provided with safe conduct through the proscribed areas by the German government itself, and were distinguished by unmistakable marks of identity, have been sunk with the same reckless lack of compassion or of principle. I was, for a little while, unable to believe that such things would in fact be done by any government that had hitherto subscribed to the humane practices of civilized nations. International law had its origin in the attempt to set up some law which would be respected and observed upon the seas, where no nation had right of dominion, and where lay the free highways of the world. By painful stage after stage has that law been built up, with meager enough results indeed, after all was accomplished that could be accomplished, but always with a clear view at least of what the heart and conscience of mankind demanded. This minimum of right the German government has swept aside under the plea of retaliation and necessity, and because it had no weapons which it could use at sea, except these which it is impossible to employ as it is employing them, without throwing to the winds all scruples of humanity or of respect for the understandings that were supposed to underlie the intercourse of the world. I am not now thinking of the loss of property involved, immense and serious as that is, but only of the wanton and wholesale destruction of the lives of non-combatants, men, women, and children, engaged in pursuits which have always, even in the darkest periods of modern history, been deemed innocent and legitimate. Property can be paid for. The lives of peaceful and innocent people cannot be. The present German submarine warfare against commerce is a warfare against mankind. It is a war against all nations. American ships have been sunk, American lives taken in ways which it has stirred us very deeply to learn of. But the ships and people of other neutral and friendly nations have been sunk and overwhelmed in the waters in the same way. There has been no discrimination. The challenge is to all mankind. Each nation must decide for itself how it will meet it. The choice we make for ourselves must be made with the moderation of counsel and the temperateness of judgment befitting our character and our motives as a nation. We must put excited feeling away. Our motive will not be revenge or the victorious assertion of the physical might of the nation, but only the vindication of right, of human right, of which we are only a single champion. When I addressed the Congress on the 26th of February last, I thought that it would suffice to assert our neutral rights with arms, our right to use the seas against unlawful interference, our right to keep our people safe against unlawful violence. But armed neutrality, it now appears, is impracticable, because submarines are in effect outlaws when used, as the German submarines have been used, against merchant shipping. It is impossible to defend ships against their attacks, as the law of nations has assumed that merchantmen would defend themselves against privateers or cruisers, visible craft giving chase upon the open sea. It is common prudence in such circumstances, grim necessity indeed, to endeavor to destroy them before they have shown their own intention. They must be dealt with upon sight, if dealt with at all. The German government denies the right of neutrals to use arms at all within the areas of the sea which it has proscribed, even in the defense of rights which no modern publicist has ever before questioned their right to defend. The intimation is conveyed that the armed guards which we have placed on our merchant ships will be treated as beyond the pale of law and subject to be dealt with as pirates would be. Armed neutrality is ineffectual enough at best. In such circumstances, and in the face of such pretensions, it is worse than ineffectual. It is likely only to produce what it was meant to prevent. It is practically certain to draw us into the war without either the rights or the effectiveness of belligerents. There is one choice we cannot make. We are incapable of making. We will not choose the path of submission and suffer the most sacred rights of our nation and our people to be ignored or violated. The wrongs against which we now array ourselves are no common wrongs. They cut to the very roots of human life. With a profound sense of the solemn and even tragical character of the step I am taking and of the grave responsibilities which it involves, but in unhesitating obedience to what I deem my constitutional duty, I advise that the Congress declare the recent course of the Imperial German government to be in fact nothing less than war against the government and people of the United States, that it formally accept the status of belligerent which has thus been thrust upon it, and that it take immediate steps not only to put the country in a more thorough state of defense, but also to exert all its power and employ all its resources to bring the government of the German Empire to terms and end the war. What this will involve is clear. It will involve the utmost practicable cooperation in counsel and action with the governments now at war with Germany, and as incident to that, the extension to those governments of the most liberal financial credits, in order that our resources may, so far as possible, be added to theirs. It will involve the organization and mobilization of all the material resources of the country to supply the materials of war and serve the incidental needs of the nation in the most abundant and yet the most economical and efficient way possible. It will involve the immediate full equipment of the Navy in all respects, but particularly in supplying it with the best means of dealing with the enemy's submarines. It will involve the immediate addition to the armed forces of the United States, already provided for by law in case of war, at least 500,000 men, who should, in my opinion, be chosen upon the principle of universal liability to service, and also the authorization of subsequent additional increments of equal force, so soon as they may be needed and can be handled in training. It will involve also, of course, the granting of adequate credits to the government, sustained, I hope, so far as they can equitably be sustained by the present generation, by well-conceived taxation. While we do these things, these deeply momentous things, let us be very clear and make very clear to all the world what our motives and our objects are. My own thought has not been driven from its habitual and normal course by the unhappy events of the last 2 months, and I do not believe that the thought of the nation has been altered or clouded by them. I have exactly the same things in mind now that I had in mind when I addressed the Senate on the 22nd of January last, the same that I had in mind when I addressed the Congress on the 3rd of February and on the 26th of February. Our object now, as then, is to vindicate the principles of peace and justice in the life of the world, as against selfish and autocratic power, and to set up amongst the really free and self-governed peoples of the world such a concert of purpose and of action as will henceforth ensure the observance of those principles. Neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable where the peace of the world is involved, and the freedom of its peoples, and the menace to that peace and freedom lies in the existence of autocratic governments, backed by organized force which is controlled wholly by their will, not by the will of their people. We have seen the last of neutrality in such circumstances. We are at the beginning of an age in which it will be insisted that the same standards of conduct and of responsibility for wrong done shall be observed among nations and their governments that are observed among the individual citizens of civilized states. We have no quarrel with the German people. We have no feeling towards them but one of sympathy and friendship. It was not upon their impulse that their government acted in entering this war. It was not with their previous knowledge or approval. It was a war determined upon, as wars used to be determined upon, in the old unhappy days when peoples were nowhere consulted by their rulers, and wars were provoked and waged in the interest of dynasties, or of little groups of ambitious men who were accustomed to use their fellow man as pawns and tools. Self-governed nations do not fill their neighbor states with spies, or set the course of intrigue to bring about some critical posture of affairs which will give them an opportunity to strike and make conquest. Such designs can be successfully worked out only under cover, and where no one has the right to ask questions. Cunningly contrived plans of deception or aggression, carried it may be, from generation to generation, can be worked out and kept from the light only within the privacy of courts, or behind the carefully guarded confidences of a narrow and privileged class. They are happily impossible where public opinion commands and insists upon full information concerning all the nation's affairs. A steadfast concert for peace can never be maintained except by a partnership of democratic nations. No autocratic government could be trusted to keep faith within it or observe its covenants. It must be a league of honor, a partnership of opinion. Intrigue would eat its vitals away, the plottings of inner circles who could plan what they would and render account to no one would be a corruption seated at its very heart. Only free peoples can hold their purpose and their honor steady to a common end and prefer the interests of mankind to any narrow interest of their own. Does not every American feel that assurance has been added to our hope for the future peace of the world by the wonderful and heartening things that have been happening within the last few weeks in Russia? Russia was known by those who knew it best to have always been in fact democratic at heart, in all the vital habits of her thought, in all the intimate relationships of her people that spoke their natural instinct, their habitual attitude towards life. The autocracy that crowned the summit of her political structure, long as it had stood, and terrible as was the reality of its power, was not in fact Russian in origin, character, or purpose, and now it has been shaken off, and the great, generous Russian people have been added in all their naive majesty and might to the forces that are fighting for freedom in the world, for justice, and for peace. Here is a fit partner for a league of honor. One of the things that has served to convince us that the Prussian autocracy was not and could never be our friend is that from the very outset of the present war, it has filled our unsuspecting communities and even our offices of government with spies and set criminal intrigues everywhere afoot against our national unity of counsel, our peace within and without our industries, and our commerce. Indeed, it is now evident that its spies were here even before the war began. And it is unhappily not a matter of conjecture, but a fact proved in our courts of justice, that the intrigues, which have more than once come perilously near to disturbing the peace and dislocating the industries of the country, have been carried on at the instigation, with the support, and even under the personal direction of official agents of the imperial government, accredited to the government of the United States. Even in checking these things and trying to extirpate them, we have sought to put the most generous interpretation possible upon them, because we knew that their source lay not in any hostile feeling or purpose of the German people towards us, who were no doubt as ignorant of them as we ourselves were, but only in the selfish designs of a government that did what it pleased and told its people nothing. But they have played their part in serving to convince us at last that that government entertains no real friendship for us and means to act against our peace and security at its convenience, that it means to stir up enemies against us at our very doors. The intercepted Zimmerman note to the German minister at Mexico City is eloquent evidence. We are accepting this challenge of hostile purpose because we know that in such a government, following such methods, we can never have a friend, and that in the presence of its organized power, always lying in wait to accomplish we know not what purpose, there can be no assured security for the democratic governments of the world. We are now about to accept gauge of battle with this natural foe to liberty, and shall, if necessary, spend the whole force of the nation to check and nullify its pretensions and its power. We are glad, now that we see the facts with no veil of false pretense about them, to fight thus for the ultimate peace of the world and for the liberation of its peoples, the German peoples included, for the rights of nations great and small, and the privilege of men everywhere to choose their way of life and of obedience. The world must be made safe for democracy. Its peace must be planted upon the tested foundations of political liberty. We have no selfish ends to serve. We desire no conquest, no dominion. We seek no indemnities for ourselves, no material compensation for the sacrifices we shall freely make. We are but one of the champions of the rights of mankind. We shall be satisfied when those rights have been made as secure as the faith and the freedom of nations can make them. Just because we fight without rancor and without selfish object, seeking nothing for ourselves, but what we shall wish to share with all free peoples, we shall, I feel confident, conduct our operations as belligerents without passion, and ourselves observe with proud punctilio the principles of right and of fair play we profess to be fighting for. I have said nothing of the governments allied with the imperial government of Germany, because they have not made war upon us, or challenged us to defend our right and our honor. The Austro-Hungarian government has indeed avowed its unqualified endorsement and acceptance of the reckless and lawless submarine warfare adopted now without disguise by the Imperial German government, and it has therefore not been possible for this government to receive Count Tarnowski, The ambassador recently accredited this government by the Imperial and Royal Government of Austria-Hungary. But that government has not actually engaged in warfare against citizens of the United States on the seas. And I take the liberty, for the present at least, of postponing a discussion of our relations with the authorities at Vienna. We enter this war only where we are clearly forced into it, because there are no other means of defending our rights. It will be all the easier for us to conduct ourselves as belligerents in a high spirit of right and fairness, because we act without animus, not in enmity towards a people, or with the desire to bring any injury or disadvantage upon them, but only in armed opposition to an irresponsible government which has thrown aside all considerations of humanity and of right, and is running amok. We are, let me say again, the sincere friends of the German people, and shall desire nothing so much as the early re-establishment of intimate relations of mutual advantage between us, however hard it may be for them, for the time being, to believe that this is spoken from our hearts. We have borne with their present government through all these bitter months because of that friendship, exercising a patience and forbearance which would otherwise have been impossible. We shall happily still have an opportunity to prove that friendship in our daily attitude and actions towards the millions of men and women of German birth and native sympathy who live amongst us and share our life, and we shall be proud to prove it towards all who are in fact loyal to their neighbors and to the government in the hour of test. They are, most of them, as true and loyal Americans as if they had never known any other fealty or allegiance. They will be prompt to stand with us in rebuking and restraining the few who may be of a different mind and purpose. If there should be disloyalty, it will be dealt with a firm hand of stern repression. But if it lifts its head at all, it will lift it only here and there, and without countenance except from a lawless and malignant few. It is a distressing and oppressive duty, gentlemen of the Congress, which I have performed in thus addressing you. There are, it may be, many months of fiery trial and sacrifice ahead of us. It is a fearful thing to lead this great, peaceful people into war, into the most terrible and disastrous of all wars, civilization itself seeming to be in the balance. But the right is more precious than peace, and we shall fight for the things which we have always carried nearest our hearts, for democracy, for the right of those who submit to authority to have a voice in their own governments, for the rights and liberties of small nations, for a universal dominion of right by such a concert of free peoples as shall bring peace and safety to all nations and make the world itself at last free. To such a task we can dedicate our lives and our fortunes, everything that we are and everything that we have, with the pride of those who know that the day has come when America is privileged to spend her blood and her might for the principles that gave her birth and happiness and the peace which she has treasured. God helping her, she can do no other.
The music tells us that it's time to take a break for a few minutes. We'll be right back to our wonderful family history offering, entitled World War I's Impact on U.S. Families. There's so much more to tell you, so stay tuned.
Embark on a journey of wonder and discovery as you step into the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in McMinnville, Oregon. Their thoughtfully curated exhibits span decades of history, showcasing everything from early aircraft to the marvels of cutting-edge aviation and spacecraft technology. Immerse yourself in the sights, sounds, and stories of our nation's rich aviation and space heritage as you travel through time. Make your way to the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in McMinnville, Oregon, today. For more information, visit their website at www.evergreenmuseum.org. Plan an enriching visit to this exquisite museum located at 500 Northeast Captain Michael King Smith Way, McMinnville, Oregon, 97128. You can also reach them by phone at 503-434-4180 or via email at info@evergreenmuseum.org. We invite you to visit, become a member, and lend your support to the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum today. You'll be thrilled every time you visit.
Introducing a totally new experience. The Kiowa County Historical Museum and Soda Fountain in Greensburg, Kansas, where state-of-the-art immersive environments, interactive exhibits, and dramatic films take you on an amazing journey of the history of Kiowa County, Kansas. Discover a world where disaster-level weather, changing of the seasons, and the patterns of past daily life are as fascinating as any battles fought by great warriors. The Kiowa County Historical Museum and Soda Fountain. Our legacy is yours. Call 620-723-1125 for more details, admissions, and hours. Plan a visit today and bring a friend or your family to 320 South Main Street Suite 100 in Greensburg, Kansas.
The Iowa Falls Historical Society, located at 519 Stevens Street in Iowa Falls. For over 30 years, the Society's mission has been dedicated to studying and preserving the history of Iowa Falls. The Society fosters an appreciation of the past, emphasizing local history. In addition to collecting and preserving historical artifacts, photographs, and personal stories, your historical society conducts research into local families and businesses. These are presented to the public through exhibits. The Historical Society also provides public accessible historic records. Learn more about your society on Facebook. Just look for the Iowa Falls Historical Society and join them in accomplishing the mission. Call 641-648-4603 for details, admissions, and hours. We'll see you there soon.
Where can you experience modern Scandinavian architecture and exhibits, a comfortable environment for visitors, and the history of the Danish in America, all in a single day? At the Museum of Danish America in Elkhorn, Iowa. You'll find a wide range of wonderful exhibits and information at the Museum of Danish America. The museum and their website are nothing short of spectacular. They put a lot of love, expertise, and hard work into the museum and the services offered to the public. They also serve the public with their genealogy and education center. The Museum of Danish America brings together people from across the nation who are interested in Danish history and genealogy. They conduct educational events, seminars, and workshops all across the United States. Learn more about their hours, admissions, membership, and volunteer opportunities by visiting danishmuseum.org. You'll be glad you did.
This is a reading of the 23rd Psalm for genealogists. Genealogy is my pastime, I shall not stray. It maketh me to lie down, and examine half-buried tombstones. It leadeth me into still courthouses, it restoreth my ancestral lineage. It leadeth me into the paths of census records, and ships passenger lists for my ancestral name's sake. Yes, though I wade through the shadows of research libraries and microfilm readers, I shall fear no discouragement, for a strong desire is with me. The curiosity and motivation, they comfort me. It demandeth preparation of storage space, for the acquisition of countless documents. It anointeth my head with burning midnight oil, my unentaughful report runneth over. Surely birth, marriage and death dates, shall validate my lineage all the days of my life. And I shall abide as a family historian forever.
And now, back to Preservationoaks. Welcome back, and now, here's Sean Radcliffe.
After the U.S. went to war, one of the most significant changes during this period was the unprecedented involvement of women in the American workforce. As men went off to fight in the war, women, many of whom had never worked outside the home, were thrust into roles in factories and businesses. This shift not only sustained the war effort, but also had lasting implications for women's empowerment and the labor market in the United States. Nearly 1 million women stepped into jobs that were previously held by men. We're not only talking about manufacturing, but all across the American landscape, from manufacturing to family farms. Women and the American family grappled with the burdens of filling the earnings void, anxiety for their loved ones' safety, and the challenges of maintaining a semblance of normalcy amid the chaos of war. When World War I erupted in 1914, the United States initially maintained a policy of neutrality. In those years leading up to World War I, the United States faced significant challenges as it endeavored to maintain a stance of neutrality in the midst of the escalating global conflict. The nation, under the leadership of President Woodrow Wilson, was determined to avoid being drawn into the war that ravaged Europe. However, maintaining neutrality proved to be a delicate and intricate task. One of the primary challenges was the complex web of diplomatic, economic, and cultural ties that connected the United States to the warring nations. The concept of neutrality was strained as the U.S. engaged in extensive trade with both the Allied and Central Powers. Economic interests, especially loans and trade relationships, created a situation where American businesses had vested interests on multiple fronts. The unrestricted submarine warfare tactics employed by Germany, particularly the sinking of the British ocean liner Lusitania in 1915, further tested America's commitment to neutrality. The tragic loss of American lives in the sinking, combined with the interception of the Zimmermann telegram in 1917, in which Germany proposed a military alliance with Mexico against the United States, heightened tensions and shifted public sentiment. Despite these provocations, President Wilson, in his initial term, maintained a policy of neutrality and sought diplomatic solutions. However, as the war intensified and the balance tipped towards the Allies, maintaining a neutral stance became increasingly challenging. The sinking of additional American and neutral vessels by German U-boats further strained relations. Ultimately, a series of events, including the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare by Germany and other provocations, led to President Wilson asking Congress to declare war on Germany in April of 1917. The struggle to maintain neutrality showcased the intricate dance between ideals and practical realities, reflecting the complexities inherent in navigating a world in turmoil. The period leading up to America's entry into World War I stands as a testament to the difficulties a nation faces when striving to remain neutral in the face of global conflicts, especially when economic ties and moral imperatives pull in opposite directions. As the country prepared for war, there was an exponential increase in the demand for labor, primarily to manufacture munitions, military equipment, and supplies for troops overseas. This heightened demand for labor was further compounded by the significant number of American men enlisting or being drafted into the military. Now let's discuss the transformation of women in the workforce. At the onset of the war, there was a prevailing belief that women were physically and mentally incapable of performing certain jobs that were traditionally reserved for men. However, as the need for labor intensified, both the government and private industry actively recruited women. Here are some examples of recruitment efforts. The United States Employment Service, the USES, a federal agency, played a significant role in coordinating labor recruitment during World War I. It actively sought to mobilize women into the workforce and match them with available job opportunities. The USES organized job fairs, disseminated information about available positions, and encouraged women to take on roles in various industries. Women's committees were formed at local and national levels to promote the engagement of women in wartime employment. These committees, often associated with organizations like the Women's Committee of the Council of National Defense, actively encouraged women to take up roles in manufacturing, clerical work, and other areas previously dominated by men. The government and private industry used publicity, posters, and other media to encourage women to join the workforce. These campaigns highlighted the patriotic duty of women to support the war effort by taking on jobs traditionally held by men. Posters depicted women working in various professions, emphasizing the importance of their contributions to the war. Industries experiencing labor shortages due to the war actively recruited women. For example, in the munitions industry, where there was a significant need for workers, companies launched recruitment campaigns targeting women. Women were urged to take on roles in ammunition factories and other war-related production. The U.S. government implemented labor policies that discouraged discrimination based on gender in employment during the war. These policies aimed to create an environment where women were more readily accepted into a variety of roles, including those traditionally held by men. While the scale of women's involvement in the workforce during World War I was not as extensive as it would become during World War II, these recruitment efforts marked a shift in attitude towards women's employment and laid the groundwork for future advancements in women's roles in the workforce. The involvement of women in the workforce during World War I and World War II marked significant shifts in societal norms and expectations. Here's a comparison and contrast of the scale and extent of women's involvement in the workforce during these two historical periods. In World War I, there was limited formal integration. Women's involvement in the workforce during World War I was substantial, but was primarily in auxiliary and support roles. While they took on jobs in munitions factories, clerical positions, nursing, and other support roles, their integration into the military structure was limited compared to World War II. The surge in women's employment during World War I was largely seen as a temporary necessity due to the shortage of male workers. Once the war concluded, societal expectations often pressured women to return to more traditional roles. Women faced challenges in gaining recognition for their contributions, and the extent of their participation varied across different areas. In some cases, women's wartime contributions were acknowledged, but they didn't immediately result in significant advancements in gender roles. In contrast, in World War II, there was a more extensive and formal integration of women into the military. The establishment of organizations like the Women's Army Corps, or WAC, or Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service, or WAVES, and others allowed women to serve in a wide range of non-combatant roles, contributing to the war effort on a larger scale. Women's roles expanded beyond traditional areas into more diverse occupations, including manufacturing, engineering, aviation, and other industries that were previously male-dominated. The iconic image of Rosie the Riveter symbolized the breadth of women's contributions to the workforce. The scale of women's involvement in World War II had a profound and lasting impact on societal attitudes toward gender roles. Women's contributions were widely recognized, and the war became a catalyst for significant advancements in women's rights and the feminist movement. The scope of women's occupations expanded significantly in World War II, encompassing a broader range of industries and roles compared to the more limited scope during World War I. The post-war impact on women's roles was more transformative after World War II. The recognition and acceptance of women in the workforce extended beyond the war period, leading to ongoing social changes and advancements in gender equality. While both World War I and World War II saw increased women's participation in the workforce, World War II marked a more extensive, formalized, and transformative shift in societal attitudes towards women's roles, setting the stage for further advancements in the post-war era. The manufacturing sector witnessed a substantial influx of female workers. Women found employment in munitions factories, textile mills, steel plants, and other industries crucial to the war effort. Their contributions proved indispensable in maintaining the production of essential war materials. This period marked a profound departure from traditional gender roles, as women took on physically demanding and industrial jobs. Women also transitioned into white-collar jobs, such as clerical positions, secretarial work, and administrative roles. The skills and competencies of female workers were increasingly recognized, challenging stereotypes about women's suitability for certain professions. For many women, their newfound employment brought economic independence and the ability to support themselves and their families. This shift in financial autonomy laid the groundwork for the feminist movement that gained momentum in the subsequent decades. Women's participation in the workforce during World War I played a pivotal role in advancing the women's suffrage movement. In 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution granted women the right to vote, a significant milestone in gender equality. World War I challenged traditional gender norms and expectations. As women demonstrated their capabilities in various roles, it gradually reshaped societal attitudes towards women's capabilities and their potential contributions to the workforce and society at large. Even after the conclusion of World War I, the impact on women in the workforce persisted. While many women returned to their homes after the war, an unknown percentage continued to work outside of traditional domestic roles. It's really an unknown percentage because statistics for this were not recorded during those times. In any case, we do know that this shift had a lasting impact on the labor market as women increasingly pursued careers and educational opportunities that were previously unavailable to them. It's very important for the families involved to note that the total number of U.S. military personnel killed in action who did not return to the United States during World War I was approximately 53,402. This figure includes casualties from various branches of the military and encompasses deaths on the Western Front, the Eastern Front, and other theaters of the war. These figures represent the military deaths and do not include non-combat related deaths, injuries, or the broader impact of the war on soldiers and their families. World War I had a profound and far-reaching impact on the United States families, and these losses in some cases caused women to, by necessity, become the primary breadwinners for their families. The period following World War I, known as the Roaring Twenties, was marked by significant societal changes, including shifts in gender roles. Women who had gained work experience during the war were more confident in their abilities and aspirations. This era saw the emergence of the new woman, who challenged traditional notions of femininity and embraced more independent lifestyles. We'll talk more about that period coming up here in a few minutes. As women entered the workforce in greater numbers, they also sought educational opportunities to further their careers. The demand for higher education for women increased, leading to the expansion of women's colleges and greater access to professional fields. The impact of World War I on the United States, particularly in terms of women's employment, cannot be overstated. The war necessitated a fundamental shift in societal roles and expectations as women stepped into a wide range of jobs that were previously considered the exclusive domain of men. This era of empowerment and opportunity laid the foundation for the social and political changes that would unfold in the decades ahead. World War I not only acted as a catalyst for the women's movement, but also stood as a testament to the resilience, adaptability, and strength of American women during a time of crisis. Their contributions not only helped secure victory in the war, but also transformed the United States into a more inclusive and egalitarian society, paving the way for future generations of women to pursue their aspirations without limitations. Another top 10 impact of World War I on U.S. families was the establishment of the U.S. Food Administration. In response to the challenges posed by World War I, the United States recognized the need for a centralized agency to manage food production, distribution, and conservation. In August 1917, President Woodrow Wilson established the U.S. Food Administration under the authority of the Lever Act, which granted the president broad powers to regulate food supplies. Herbert Hoover, an engineer and humanitarian, had already gained recognition for his work in Europe during World War I, where he organized relief efforts for war-torn countries. His experience in efficiently managing food distribution and relief efforts made him a natural choice for the role of Director of the U.S. Food Administration. Appointed by President Wilson as Director of the U.S. Food Administration, Hoover took a proactive approach to address the challenges of food supply during the war. He believed that voluntary cooperation and conservation efforts could help ensure that American troops and allies overseas received the necessary food supplies. Hoover launched a highly successful campaign with the slogan, "Food will win the war." This campaign encouraged Americans to voluntarily reduce food consumption, eliminate waste, and adopt wheatless, meatless, and porkless days to conserve resources for the war effort. Under Hoover's leadership, the U.S. Food Administration implemented price controls on certain essential goods to prevent profiteering and ensure fair distribution. These measures aimed to keep food prices stable and accessible to all segments of the population. Hoover recognized the importance of nutrition in maintaining a healthy and productive workforce. The Food Administration engaged in extensive educational efforts to teach Americans about nutrition and the importance of a balanced diet. Hoover's leadership and the efforts of the U.S. Food Administration played a crucial role in ensuring that American soldiers and their allies received an adequate food supply during the war. Through voluntary conservation, food drives, and educational campaigns, the U.S. Food Administration contributed to effective resource management. Hoover's success in managing the U.S. Food Administration bolstered his reputation as an efficient and capable leader. His humanitarian work in Europe and his role in ensuring food stability during the war further solidified his image as a problem solver. His experience in this role would prove instrumental in his future political career, culminating in his presidency and his subsequent contributions to American society. The next entry in our list of top 10 impacts of World War I on U.S. families is significant technology advancements. The U.S. experienced improvements in weapons and warfare technology. The development and deployment of armored tanks during World War I revolutionized ground warfare. These machines could traverse difficult terrain and withstand enemy fire, changing the dynamics of trench warfare. The use of chemical weapons such as mustard gas and chlorine gas led to advancements in protective gear and gas masks. World War I saw the emergence of combat aircraft, including fighter planes and bombers. The aerial battles of the war accelerated aviation technology, leading to improvements in engines, aerodynamics, and weaponry. The war saw the widespread use of machine guns, which had a significant impact on infantry tactics. Efforts to improve these weapons continued after the war, leading to more advanced designs. Advances in artillery technology, including longer-range guns and more accurate targeting, had a devastating impact on the battlefield. The need for rapid communication between the front lines and headquarters drove advancements in telecommunications technology. This resulted in more efficient telegraph and telephone systems. World War I also witnessed the use of radios for military communication. This technology became more portable and reliable, paving the way for development of civilian broadcasting in the post-war era. There were also medical advancements. The scale of casualties in World War I prompted the development of efficient triage systems to prioritize medical care for wounded soldiers. The war led to innovations in prosthetic limbs and rehabilitation techniques for injured veterans. Advances in sanitation and disease control helped to reduce the spread of illnesses among troops. The war brought improvements in transportation. The war accelerated the use of motor vehicles for military purposes, leading to improvements in automotive technology. After the war, this had a significant impact on civilian transportation and the automotive industry. Railways played a vital role in transporting troops and supplies during World War I. Improvements in rail transportation technologies made logistics more efficient. There were improvements made in manufacturing as a result of the war. The demand for wartime production, especially for weapons and munitions, led to advancements in mass production techniques and assembly line processes. The development of new alloys and metallurgical techniques contributed to the creation of stronger and more durable materials for military equipment. Research into aerodynamics and aircraft design during the war laid the foundation for more efficient and faster aircraft. Submarines played a significant role in naval warfare during World War I. The war led to improvements in submarine technology and tactics. The need for explosives, chemicals, and materials for the war effort led to advancements in the chemical industry, which continued to benefit civilian industries after the war. World War I was a catalyst for numerous technological advances across various fields. The demands of modern warfare prompted innovation and accelerated the development of technologies that would shape the world in the post-war era. Many of these advancements had a lasting impact, contributing to the rapid progress of the 20th century and beyond. With regard to the U.S. economy and its impact on U.S. families, World War I had some of the following impacts. World War I had a complex and multifaceted impact on the United States, including economic growth and prosperity in certain sectors of the economy. Here are some of the key ways in which the war contributed to growth and prosperity in the United States. The war generated significant industrial expansion. There was a high demand for military equipment, munitions, and supplies, which led to a surge in industrial production. American factories shifted their focus to wartime production, resulting in increased manufacturing output. Industries such as steel, chemicals, machinery, and textiles experienced substantial growth as they supplied the war effort with essential materials and goods. The mobilization for war created millions of jobs in manufacturing, shipbuilding, munitions, production, and other sectors. As men enlisted in the military, women and African Americans increasingly entered the workforce to fill these vacancies. The labor force participation of women in particular expanded significantly during the war, marking a significant step towards greater gender inclusivity in the workforce. The war led to increased demand for American agricultural products, both domestically and for export to allied nations. The United States became a major supplier of goods to the Allied powers during the war. This expansion of exports boosted American industries and helped create jobs. Farmers experienced a boom in production and higher prices for their crops. Wheat, corn, and other staples were in high demand, and agricultural income rose during the war years. Advances in mechanization also contributed to increased productivity. The federal government invested in infrastructure projects to support the war effort. This included the construction of new roads, railways, and ports, which not only facilitated military logistics but also improved overall transportation infrastructure. War bonds and government securities were issued to finance the war, offering Americans the opportunity to invest in these instruments. This encouraged savings and investment, benefiting individuals, and the economy as a whole experienced financial prosperity. The war also led to a strengthening of the American financial system, with Wall Street becoming a more prominent global financial center. As mentioned earlier, World War I drove technological advancements in various sectors, including aviation, telecommunications, and manufacturing. These advancements not only benefited the war effort, but also laid the groundwork for post-war economic growth. Many American corporations experienced significant increases in profits during the war, especially those engaged in war-related industries. The war-induced demand allowed some companies to expand and consolidate their positions in their respective markets. It's important to note that the United States is very large and diverse. While there was economic growth and prosperity during World War I, this period was also marked by inflation, labor disputes, and social challenges. Additionally, the economic benefits were not distributed evenly, and some segments of the population, particularly those in lower income groups, faced economic hardships. After World War I, the United States entered a brief post-war recession, but overall, the war laid the foundation for the economic growth and transformation of the 1920s, often referred to as the Roaring Twenties, which saw significant societal and economic changes. World War I also had a notable impact on American culture, including increased interest in sports and entertainment. The war influenced various aspects of American society and helped shape the cultural landscape during and after the conflict. Here's how World War I contributed to changes in American culture. The war generated a sense of unity and patriotism in the United States. This collective spirit influenced cultural values and promoted a greater appreciation for American identity and heritage. As people rallied around the war effort, there was a heightened sense of national pride and loyalty, which often found expression in cultural activities. Sports and entertainment served as avenues for Americans to express their patriotism and show support for the troops. Sporting events in particular became a platform for raising funds for the war and boosting morale. Baseball in particular gained prominence during World War I. The sport was seen as a symbol of American values and was used to raise money for the war effort through charity games and exhibitions. The war led to an expansion of entertainment venues, including theaters, cinemas, and concert halls. The demand for entertainment grew as people sought diversion from the challenges and anxieties of wartime life. The cinema in particular gained popularity during this period, with the emergence of Hollywood as a major center of the film industry. The history of the film industry and World War I intersected in several ways, influencing each other during a crucial period in the early 20th century. Here are some key points of intersection. During World War I, film emerged as a powerful medium for government publicity. Governments on both sides of the conflict used films to shape public opinion, boost morale, and garner support for the war effort. These films depicted enemy forces negatively, emphasized patriotic duty, and portrayed the war in a way that aligned with national interests. The war prompted a surge in the production and consumption of newsreels. Newsreels were short documentary films shown in theaters, providing audiences with the latest updates on the war. These newsreels often contained footage of battles, life on the home front, and other war-related events. They served as a primary source of information about the war for the general public. As the war unfolded, the film industry also served as a form of entertainment and escapism for audiences seeking a diversion from the grim realities of the conflict. Movie theaters became popular venues for people to escape and enjoy fictional stories, comedies, and dramas that provided a temporary reprieve from the war's hardships. Films had a profound impact on shaping public opinion about the war. The cinematic portrayal of the conflict played a role in forming perceptions of heroism, sacrifice, and the broader narrative of the war. Filmmakers were tasked with creating content that aligned with national interests and contributed to the wartime narrative. After the war, the film industry continued to engage with the legacy of World War I. Many films explored the impact of the war on individuals and societies, reflecting on the trauma, loss, and social changes that resulted from the conflict. These films contributed to the broader cultural memory of World War I. World War I coincided with technological advancements in filmmaking. The war accelerated the development of techniques such as aerial photography and cinematography. These innovations influenced both wartime propaganda films and the overall evolution of filmmaking as an art form. In the post-war period, filmmakers produced documentaries that chronicled the events of World War I. These documentaries aimed to preserve historical records and educate future generations about the war's impact. They often use a combination of archival footage and interviews to provide a comprehensive view of the conflict. The intersection of the film industry and World War I had a lasting impact on both. The war shaped the content and purpose of films, while advancements in filmmaking technology and techniques influenced the portrayal of war on the big screen. The relationship between cinema and war continued to evolve in subsequent conflicts, with film remaining a powerful medium for storytelling, reflection, and the dissemination of information. Music played a significant role in wartime culture. Patriotic songs such as Over There by George M. Cohan became iconic and instilled a sense of national pride. The war also influenced the development of jazz music, with African American musicians contributing to its growth in popularity. Jazz, often considered America's unique art form, became a symbol of cultural innovation. World War I inspired a body of literature and art that reflected experiences and emotions of the era. Authors like Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald drew on their own experiences as soldiers and used them as themes in their works. The war influenced modernist art movements, with artists exploring new forms of expressions in response to the upheaval of the time. The wartime shift in gender roles, with women taking on new responsibilities in the workforce, influenced cultural perceptions of gender. This change was reflected in literature, film, and other forms of entertainment. The 1920s saw the emergence of the flapper archetype, symbolizing the more independent and liberated woman of the post-war era. After the war, the United States actively commemorated and remembered the sacrifices of the soldiers through various cultural expressions, including memorial services, monuments, and literature. The war's impact on the collective memory of the nation was significant and continued to be reflected in American culture for years to come. World War I had a profound influence on American culture by fostering patriotism, altering gender roles, and shaping artistic expressions. It led to increased interest in sports and entertainment as vehicles for expressing national identity and providing solace during a time of familial loss, world conflict, and uncertainty. These cultural changes continued to reverberate in the post-war era and contributed to the evolving landscape of American society. World War I had a significant impact on American education, including an increased emphasis on science and technology. The war accelerated changes in the education system, leading to a greater focus on scientific and technical subjects. Here are some ways in which World War I influenced education in the United States. The demands of modern warfare required a workforce with specialized skills in science, engineering, and technology. To meet these demands, educational institutions, particularly universities and technical schools, expanded their science and engineering programs. The federal government provided financial support to educational institutions for research and training in fields relevant to the war effort, encouraging the growth of scientific and technical education. The war stimulated research and innovation in various scientific disciplines such as chemistry, physics, medicine, and engineering. Universities and research institutions played a crucial role in conducting research related to the war, including the development of weapons, medical advancements, and communications technologies. Government grants and contracts funded scientific research, leading to advancements that had both military and civilian applications. Vocational education became more prominent as the war emphasized the need for skilled workers in industries essential to the war effort. Vocational schools and programs were established to train individuals in fields such as manufacturing, mechanics, and agriculture. These programs provided practical training and contributed to a more technically proficient workforce. Many educational institutions, including universities and colleges, established military training programs such as Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC, to prepare students for potential military service. These programs offered instruction in military science and leadership. The war also increased interest in foreign languages, particularly those of allied and enemy nations. Language instruction was seen as valuable for military intelligence and diplomatic purposes. Colleges and universities expanded their language programs to meet the demand for linguistics and interpreters. The wartime shift in gender roles extended to education. Women played a more active role in scientific research, and their contributions to the war effort highlighted the importance of women's education. The war indirectly contributed to greater opportunities for women in higher education and scientific fields. The research conducted during World War I laid the groundwork for future scientific advancements and technological innovations. Many wartime discoveries and technologies continued to shape the trajectory of American science and technology in the post-war era. World War I had a transformative effect on American education by fostering a greater emphasis on science, technology, and practical skills. The wartime needs and the role of education in supporting the war effort led to an expansion of scientific and technical education, increased research activities, and the development of programs that prepared students for a changing workforce. These changes had a lasting impact on the American education system and contributed to the country's growing emphasis on scientific and technological advancements in the decades that followed.
The soothing melody signals a brief intermission is in order. Don't go too far, as we'll soon return to our captivating historical presentation about World War I. and its impact on U.S. families, featuring the one and only Sean Radcliffe. In the annals of war, World War I in Europe was tragic, brutal, unforgiving, and had a lasting impact on U.S. families all across our country.
This program will now pause for universal identification.
I was created by a consummate professional. Everything was just right, notes perfect, precise keys, and the shine, oh my. I was so shiny. John bought me. He was good to me, and that man could play. We'd practice almost every day. Then he'd clean me, and I'd be ready for the next day. Occasionally, he'd give me a good bath and shine me up. What a life we had, driving from place to place, and playing while people danced. Others would join in, and we'd all have a grand time making music. John traded me to Joe for a tenor model. Joe didn't give me baths, and I mostly sat in my case. I was there for years, until I went to a school. I helped youngsters learn how to play. It was great, all that energy and marching. But I didn't get the upkeep I really needed, and eventually, well, I was put away because I wasn't shiny anymore. My pads were old, hadn't had a good bath in decades, had a few dents, and there were a couple of key guards broken. Finally, I was given to the Historical Society. They made sure all my parts were like new. My shine is back. Now I look slick. I'm in a glass enclosure and not a case. Every day, people talk about how beautiful I am, the good times when John and I played music, and in the background, they play songs from when I was with John. I feel good that I can help others understand the past, which I guess I'm now a part of.
Rather than throwing it out, please donate historical records and objects to your local historical society today.
I am General Matto Vandu Maximanus, from the planet you refer to as BD 114672C. I am the legate of the 2nd AB Picturus B region, governor of the approaches to NU Octantis A B, interplanetary consul, commander of the legions of AB Picturus A, 91 Aquari B, Mu Leonis B, and Gamma Librae B, and I listen to Preservation Oaks on microstream radio.
9 out of 10 listeners agree. Preservation Oaks is the best podcast on the internet.
If you're a historical or genealogical society listening to Preservation Oaks, and you'd like to be a guest on the program, please email preservationoaks@gmail.com. Again, that's preservationoaks@gmail.com.
There you are, in your doctor's waiting room again. Nothing to do but flip through an old magazine from 2014. But, are you just waiting for your doctor, or is she really your partner in preserving history? Unsung heroes volunteering at the local historical society, gearing up for fundraising extravaganzas. Ever spread the word about the Preservation Oaks podcast to your friends? Elevate your waiting game by listening to Preservation Oaks episodes, making every minute riveting. Tune in at preservationoaks.podbean.com, YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, or your favorite podcast platform. Unleash the power of history during your wait.
And now back to Preservation Oaks. Welcome back, and now let's hear from the enigmatic Sean Radcliffe.
World War I had a profound impact on American politics, leading to significant changes in government spending and regulation. The war necessitated an expansion of government involvement in various aspects of the economy and society. Here are some ways in which World War I influenced American politics. The United States entered World War I in 1917, and the war effort required substantial financial resources. To finance the war, the federal government dramatically increased its spending. War-related expenditures included the purchase of military equipment, supplies, and munitions, as well as the support of troops both domestically and overseas. This expansion of government spending marked a departure from pre-war fiscal policies. To generate revenue for the war effort, the government introduced new taxes. The Revenue Act of 1917 and subsequent legislation imposed income taxes on a broader segment of the population and raised tax rates for higher incomes. These tax measures helped fund the war and also contributed to the broader trend of increasing federal revenue through income taxation. The government launched campaigns to encourage citizens to purchase war bonds and liberty loans. These initiatives allowed ordinary Americans to invest in the war effort and provided the government with much-needed funds. The sale of war bonds became a symbol of patriotism and a way for individuals to contribute to the war. The war led to the creation of various government agencies to manage aspects of the war effort. The War Industries Board, for example, oversaw the allocation of resources for wartime production, while the Food Administration regulated food supplies. The establishment of these agencies marked an expansion of the federal government's regulatory and interventionist role in the economy. The federal government exercised greater control over economic activities during the war. This included regulating prices, wages, and the allocation of resources to ensure that the war effort was adequately supported. The Lever Act of 1917, for instance, granted the president the authority to control the production, distribution, and price of food and fuel. In 1917, the Selective Service Act was enacted, introducing the draft and the conscription of men into the military. This marked a significant expansion of federal authority and intervention in individual lives. World War I influenced American foreign policy and the nation's commitment to internationalism. The war led to the creation of the League of Nations, which the United States initially joined discussions about but ultimately did not ratify. The war's impact on international relations and the debate over U.S. involvement in global affairs continued to shape American foreign policy. Labor unions gained strength during the war as workers sought better wages and working conditions. The government played a role in mediating labor disputes and ensuring labor stability to support the war effort. The war accelerated the growth of the labor movement and led to changes in labor relations and regulations. World War I had a transformative effect on American politics, leading to increased government spending, the introduction of new taxes, and the expansion of government agencies and regulations. These changes reflected the necessity of mobilizing resources for the war effort and had lasting implications for the role of the federal government in the U.S. economy and society. The war also influenced debates about internationalism and foreign policy, shaping the direction of American politics in the years that followed. World War I had a profound impact on American foreign policy and marked a significant shift towards increased involvement in international affairs. Prior to the war, the United States had followed a policy of relative isolationism, but the war's effects on the global stage and the post-war settlement led to a greater engagement with international issues. Here are some key ways in which World War I influenced American foreign policy. World War I marked the emergence of the United States as a major global power. The U.S. played a crucial role in the Allied victory and was a key participant in the negotiations that followed the war. President Woodrow Wilson's leadership at the Paris Peace Conference and his advocacy for the creation of the League of Nations solidified Americans' position on the world stage. President Woodrow Wilson was a strong advocate for the establishment of the League of Nations, an international organization aimed at promoting peace and resolving conflicts through diplomacy. The League was a significant departure from traditional American foreign policy, which had largely avoided permanent alliances. While the U.S. played a central role in the League's creation, the Senate ultimately rejected the Treaty of Versailles and U.S. membership in the League. Nevertheless, the idea of international cooperation and collective security had been introduced into American foreign policy discussions. President Wilson's 14-point speech outlined a vision of a more idealistic and moralistic foreign policy, emphasizing principles such as self-determination for nations and a promotion of democracy. These idealistic principles influenced subsequent American foreign policy approaches and discussions about the country's role in the world. The war disrupted global trade and economic stability. In response, the United States sought to secure its economic interest abroad by participating in international negotiations and trade agreements. The U.S. played a key role in the negotiations that led to the Treaty of Versailles and other post-war treaties, including economic provisions aimed at preventing economic destabilization. The war led to a reassessment of American military preparedness and the need for a modernized military. The U.S. expanded its Navy and military capabilities to be better prepared for potential future conflicts. This focus on military preparedness reflected a growing recognition of the interconnectedness of global security. The aftermath of World War I saw the rise of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and the spread of communism. This fueled concerns in the United States about the global spread of communism, leading to a period known as the Red Scare. American foreign policy reflected a growing anti-communist sentiment, with efforts to contain the spread of communist ideology. World War I contributed to the weakening of colonial empires in Europe. The United States expressed anti-imperialist sentiments and supported the principle of self-determination for colonial nations. These principles influenced American foreign policy discussions regarding colonialism and independence movements in the post-war period. World War I had a transformative effect on the American foreign policy by propelling the United States into a more active role on the global stage. While the country did not ultimately join the League of Nations, the war's impact on international affairs and the shaping of the post-war world order marked a significant departure from the traditional policy of isolationism. The war laid the groundwork for the United States to become a more engaged and influential participant in international politics and diplomacy in the decades that followed. While World War I led to increased American involvement in international affairs during and immediately after the conflict, it also had the paradoxical effect of sparking a desire for greater isolationism in some segments of American society in the years that followed. This shift in sentiment was influenced by various factors, including war weariness, disillusionment with the results of the war, and a desire to focus on domestic issues. Here are some of the key reasons why isolationist sentiments gained traction in post-World War I America. World War I had been a grueling and costly conflict. American soldiers returned home with physical and emotional scars. and many citizens were deeply affected by the loss of loved ones. This war weariness led to a desire for peace and a reluctance to become embroiled in future conflicts. While President Woodrow Wilson had championed the idea of a just and lasting peace through his 14 points, the final Treaty of Versailles did not fully reflect these principles. The treaty included punitive measures against Germany and imposed territorial changes that fueled resentment and instability in Europe. President Wilson's advocacy for the League of Nations faced significant opposition in the U.S. Senate, and the Senate ultimately rejected the Treaty of Versailles and U.S. membership in the League. This rejection was seen by some as a rejection of international involvement. In the post-war period, the United States experienced an economic boom known as the Roaring Twenties. This period of prosperity led some to argue that the country should focus on its own economic interest and avoid foreign entanglements that could disrupt economic growth. Polls and surveys conducted in the 1920s often reflected a desire for the United States to stay out of international conflicts. Public opinion supported a policy of avoiding military alliances and foreign interventions. In response to isolationist sentiments, Congress passed a series of neutrality acts during the 1930s aimed at keeping the United States out of potential future conflicts. These acts restricted arms sales, loans, and trade with belligerent nations. The memory of World War I and its devastating impact remained fresh in the minds of many Americans. This memory served as a cautionary tale against involvement in future foreign conflicts. It's important to note that isolationism was not a uniform or static ideology in the United States. While some segments of the society advocated for a more isolationist foreign policies, others recognized the need for international engagement and cooperation, especially as global tensions increased in the 1930s. Ultimately, the United States would be drawn into World War II in 1941, a conflict that decisively ended the era of American isolationism and solidified the country's role as a major player in international affairs. While there was a push for greater international involvement through the League of Nations, there were also concerns about the potential loss of American sovereignty and the entanglements of international alliances. The debate over internationalism versus isolationism continued to shape U.S. foreign policy discussions in the interwar years. These additional aspects highlight the multifaceted impact of World War I on the United States, from social and cultural changes to significant developments in civil rights and public health. While we've covered many significant aspects of the impacts of World War I on the United States and its families in our conversation, there are always additional nuances and details to explore. One notable area that we haven't delved into extensively is the social and cultural changes brought about by the war. Here are a few more aspects worth considering. The war had an impact on African Americans who served in segregated units during the conflict. The wartime experience, combined with the promise of better economic opportunities, contributed to the Great Migration, a significant movement of African Americans from the rural South to the urban North, where they sought jobs and greater freedom from segregation and discrimination. The African American Great Migration in the United States took place primarily during the first half of the 20th century. This mass movement of African Americans from the rural southern United States to the urban North and West occurred in multiple waves. The first Great Migration occurred from around 1916 to 1940, driven by factors such as the harsh economic conditions, racial segregation, and violence in the southern states. Many African Americans sought better job opportunities, improved living conditions, and escape from racial discrimination by moving to cities in the North, particularly in the industrial centers. The second Great Migration occurred from around 1941 to 1970 during and after World War II. This wave of migration was influenced by similar factors as the first, as well as the demand for labor in northern industries during the war and the subsequent economic opportunities in the post-war period. Overall, the Great Migration had a significant impact on the demographic, social, and cultural landscape of the United States. It played a crucial role in the growth of urban African American communities in cities like Chicago, Detroit, New York, and others, contributing to the development of the civil rights movement and shaping the broader history of the country. Directly after World War I, and some say as a direct result of our troops returning from World War I, but nobody knows for sure and certain, the U.S. and our families experienced the global influenza pandemic of 1918. Often referred to as the Spanish flu, this disease had a devastating impact on the United States. It coincided with the war and resulted in significant loss of life, affecting communities across the country. The pandemic had long-term health and economic consequences. The Spanish influenza, also known as the 1918 influenza pandemic, was a severe widespread influenza, or flu, outbreak that occurred globally from 1918 to 1919. It is considered one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Here are some key points about the Spanish influenza. The Spanish influenza affected people worldwide, infecting an estimated 1/3 of the global population. It's estimated to have caused the deaths of tens of millions of people. The virus responsible for the Spanish influenza was the H1N1 influenza A virus. It had a high mortality rate, and unlike typical influenza viruses that primarily affect the very young and the elderly, the 1918 pandemic had a higher mortality rate among healthy young adults. What made the Spanish influenza particularly deadly was its unusual severity, especially for healthy adults. The strong immune response it triggered is believed to have contributed to the high mortality rate. The term Spanish influenza is somewhat misleading. The name originated because Spain, being a neutral country during World War I, did not censor reports of the outbreak, leading to the false impression that the pandemic was more severe in Spain. In reality, the flu likely originated elsewhere. The pandemic occurred in multiple waves, with the second wave being the most severe. The waves varied in terms of severity and impact in different regions. The Spanish influenza had a profound impact on societies around the world. It caused widespread fear and panic, disrupted daily life, and strained healthcare systems. Many people who fell ill experienced severe symptoms, and mortality rates were particularly high among certain demographics. In 1918, influenza pandemic led to advancements in influenza research and a better understanding of viral diseases. It also influenced public health measures and pandemic preparedness in subsequent years. It's important to note that while the Spanish influenza was a devastating pandemic, the world has experienced and learned from other influenza pandemics since then, including the H1N1 pandemic in 2009 and, of course, COVID-19. Ongoing efforts in global health aim to monitor and respond to potential future influenza outbreaks. The Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918 had a profound impact on the United States, with a significant number of people succumbing to the virus. Estimates of the death toll in the U.S. vary. but it's commonly cited that approximately 675,000 people died from the Spanish influenza during the course of the pandemic. This made it one of the deadliest pandemics in U.S. history, and think about the impact on our families. As for the states most impacted, the severity of the outbreak varied across the country. Urban areas with high population density and military bases tended to experience more severe outbreaks. Cities like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New York were among the hardest hit. However, rural areas were not spared, and the virus affected communities nationwide. Public health measures such as quarantine, isolation, good personal hygiene, use of disinfectants, and limitations on public gatherings were implemented in various places in an attempt to control the spread of the virus. These measures were sometimes inconsistently applied and met with resistance, contributing to the challenges in managing the pandemic. The Spanish influenza pandemic had a lasting impact on public health practices, influencing subsequent responses to influenza outbreaks and other infectious diseases. Now, let's talk about the Roaring Twenties. This all occurred after World War I, but it's nonetheless interesting because it's a direct impact of World War I on the U.S. During World War I, the temperance movement gained momentum, and the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages, was ratified in 1919. Prohibition had a lasting impact on American society and led to significant changes in the alcohol industry. The 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which established prohibition, was overturned by the 21st Amendment. The 21st Amendment was ratified on December 5, 1933. This amendment repealed the 18th Amendment and effectively ended the nationwide prohibition of the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages in the United States. The repeal of prohibition was a significant moment in U.S. history, marking the end of the era during which the production and sale of alcoholic beverages were banned. The 1920s earned the nickname the Roaring Twenties, despite the fact that the early part of the decade was marked by prohibition, a nationwide ban on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages. The name Roaring Twenties reflects the dynamic and vibrant cultural, social, and economic changes that characterized the era despite the restrictions imposed by prohibition. Several factors contributed to the exuberant atmosphere of the 1920s. The United States experienced a period of economic growth after World War I. The economy boomed, and many people had more disposable income, leading to increased spending on entertainment, fashion, and leisure. The 1920s witnessed a surge in cultural and artistic innovation. This was the Jazz Age, marked by the popularity of jazz music and dance, and the era saw the rise of new forms of literature, art, and entertainment. While Prohibition officially banned the sale and consumption of alcohol, it didn't stop the production or distribution of alcoholic beverages entirely. Illicit bars, known as speakeasies, flourished during this time. Organized crime also took advantage of the demand for alcohol, leading to the rise of notorious figures like Al Capone. The 1920s saw significant social changes, including the adoption of more liberal attitudes towards fashion, gender roles, and sexuality. Women's suffrage became a reality with the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. Advances in technology, such as the widespread use of the automobile and the spread of radio, contributed to a more interconnected and modern society. While Prohibition was in effect during the early 1920s, the enforcement of anti-alcohol laws proved challenging, and there was widespread non-compliance. The combination of economic prosperity, cultural dynamism, and the rebellious spirit against prohibition contributed to the lively and exuberant atmosphere that earned the decade its Roaring Twenties moniker. World War I left a lasting imprint on American society, politics, and culture, shaping the nation's trajectory for the 20th century and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude our exploration of the profound impacts of World War I on American families, I invite you to reflect on the lives of your own grandparents, great-grandparents, or even great-great-grandparents, the individuals who lived through these challenging yet remarkable times. The stories we've delved into during this episode are not just historical accounts, but the living narratives of those who weathered the storms of war, faced unprecedented changes, and contributed to shaping the world we inhabit today. Each name in our family trees represents more than just a set of dates and records. They embody the resilience, sacrifice, and triumphs of generations past. As we uncover the narratives of their lives, we move beyond the confines of history books and archival documents. We find ourselves in the living rooms of our ancestors, sharing their dreams, navigating their challenges, and celebrating their victories. In understanding the impact of World War I on American families, we gain profound insights into the essence of our own family histories. Our forebears not only endured the tumultuous events of their time, but also forged enduring bonds, built communities, and laid the foundations for the opportunities we enjoy today. By connecting with these stories, we elevate our family history research from a mere compilation of facts to a vivid tapestry of human experiences. So here in the 21st century, with all the things that we've accomplished thus far in our civilization, let us carry forward the legacy of resilience, unity, and hope that our ancestors bequeathed to us. Their stories are not just tales from the past. They are the living roots that anchor us in our familial and national identity. As we embark on our own journeys of discovery, may we continue to honor their memory by preserving and sharing the narratives that define not only our family histories, but the collective story of the United States and its remarkable evolution through the crucible of World War I. Thank you for joining me on this reflective journey, and may the stories of our ancestors and our uniquely American cultural heritage continue to inspire and resonate through the generations to come in your own families. As always, if questions occur to you and you'd like more information, please send email to preservationoaks@gmail.com. I hope this information helps the audience understand more about the lives of your ancestors and how these events in history impacted them and their families. Well, your families. These events shaped our families and our nation. We learn from the past, and by doing so, we have the opportunity to use the information to help us discern the way forward into the future. Okay, that's a wrap for this episode. Music used today is from Cymbalbird, Antracto, Music Dream, Russell Frederick, and Scott Holmes. MicroStream Radio is a registered trademark. You can visit us at www.microstreamradio.com. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted by MicroStream Radio. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere without the written permission of MicroStream Radio. Thank you to everyone for listening. This is Sean Radcliffe. We'll see you all next time on Preservation Oaks. And until then, keep on giving and keep on living the good life.